That derelict eyesore was sold at auction this morning, and frankly, the slip should have been emptied years ago. That was Diane Coyle, president of the Cedar Hollow Lake Association for 9 years, telling me she had sold my boat for back dues I never owed her. The boat was a 1979 wooden Chris Craft my late wife and I had restored over 4 winters, and Diane had it hauled off a slip my family has held title to since the lake was first surveyed. What Diane did not know that morning was that I am the recorded owner of the Marina parcel her association was built around, and the slip she emptied was never hers to touch. So let me ask you something before I tell you the rest. If a woman in a linen blazer handed you a forged invoice and a towing receipt for the one thing your wife left behind, would you have shouted? Or would you have gone home and opened the folder? My name is Walt Brenner. I am 61 years old, and for 34 years, I worked as a licensed marine surveyor up and down this stretch of the Idaho Panhandle, inspecting hulls and writing the reports that banks and insurers relied on before they signed a check. A surveyor's whole job is to look at a thing and tell people what is actually there, not what somebody wishes were there. I have stood in 1,000 engine compartments with a flashlight and a moisture meter, and told a hopeful buyer that the boat he loved had a rotten stringer and was worth half what he was about to pay. I have made men angry by being right. I learned a long time ago that the document and the measurement do not care how loud anyone gets, and that a calm man with the correct paper in his hand has already won the argument before it starts. I know what a clean title looks like, and I know what a bluff looks like. And I had been watching Diane Coyle bluff for almost a decade. My place sits on the north shoulder of Cedar Hollow Lake, 11 acres of pine and shoreline that my grandfather bought in 1951. And that came to me when my father passed. The water frontage includes the old commercial Marina basin, 22 slips, a fuel dock long since capped, and a launch ramp the county still lists under my parcel number. The basin is the only true deep water on the lake, a horseshoe of dark green that holds 12 feet at the dock face even in a dry August, scooped out by a glacier a long time before any of us got here to argue about it. My grandfather ran a fishing concession out of it after the war, rented John boats and sold worms and gas, and the old fuel pump still stands at the head of the dock with its glass globe gone milky. My father let the commercial side wind down, but he never let the title lapse, and he taught me to walk the property line every spring with the deed in my hand, reading the description against the ground the way you would check a hull against the survey. My wife, Carol, and I raised our daughter there. Carol was a school teacher, patient in a way I never managed, and she loved that water more than I did. We bought the Chris Craft as a hull and a box of rotten parts the second winter we were married. A 1979 19-footer somebody had left to die under a tarp, and we spent 4 winters bringing it back. Carol did the bright work. She had a touch with varnish I never got near, 8 coats hand-rubbed between each. And she would sit in the cold shop with a heater at her feet and a thermos of coffee and tell me about her students while she sanded. Carol died 4 years ago, in the spring, after a short, hard illness. And the Chris Craft was the last thing the two of us finished together. The first season after, I could not bring myself to take it off the trailer. The second season, I put it in the water, and Maddie and I ran it out to the middle of the lake and shut the engine off and just sat there. So when I say the boat was the last thing my wife left me, I want you to understand it was not a possession. It was the 4 winters. I want to be plain about something because it matters for everything that follows. I did not pick this fight. I have never once driven a golf cart down somebody's street to measure their grass. I tried, more times than I can count, to be a reasonable neighbor to a woman who treated reasonableness as a weakness. I kept records the way I had kept survey files my whole working life. Dated, labeled, filed the same afternoon the thing happened. That habit is the only reason this story ends the way it does. And I will tell you exactly how to build the same habit before we are through. Cedar Hollow started as a fishing camp. In the late 80s, a developer platted the wooded benches above the South Shore into lots and formed a homeowners association to mow the common areas and keep the gravel roads graded. That association covers the platted subdivision and nothing else. It does not cover my 11 acres on the north shoulder because my land was never part of the plat. My grandfather's parcel predates the subdivision by 37 years, and the Marina Basin sits on a separate meets and bounds description recorded in 1951. I have the recorded deed, the recorded plat of the original survey, and a chain of title with no gap in it. Diane Coyle had the association directory, a laminated badge, and a husband. Diane became president the year after Carol and I moved back full-time. The first time I met her, she was standing at the head of my launch ramp in white capri pants and boat shoes that had never seen water, holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield. She had a sharp blonde bob that did not move in the wind, and a pair of sunglasses pushed up on the crown of her head. And she had parked a white SUV with a vanity plate halfway across my ramp, so a truck and trailer could not have backed past her if they tried. I had come down to check a dock line. I had not invited her, and I did not know her name yet. "This ramp falls within our community waterfront," she said, "and community waterfront is functionally part of our jurisdiction." I told her the ramp was on my parcel, that it had been since before the subdivision existed, and that she was welcome to look at the county record. She smiled the way people smile when they have already decided not to hear you. "I'm sure you believe that," she said, "but the association has been managing this shoreline for years, and we have standards. There's a process. You'll be hearing from us." She wrote something on her clipboard. She did not ask my name. She got into the white SUV and backed it off my ramp and drove up the hill, and I stood there a minute looking at the tire marks she had left in the gravel. I went inside and started a folder. I labeled it with her name, which I got later from the association directory, and the date. That folder is the spine of everything that happened next. The first formal overreach came by mail. A letter on association letterhead informed me that my waterfront structures were in violation of community aesthetic standards and that I would be assessed a monthly fee until I brought them into compliance. There was no description of the violation and no citation to any covenant, because no covenant applied to me. I wrote back one paragraph stating that my parcel was not within the association and enclosing a copy of my deed. I sent it certified. I kept the green card when it came back signed. That was incident 1. I wrote it on the inside cover of the folder. The date, the amount, the certified number. The letters did not stop. They arrived monthly, each one adding a late fee to the imaginary balance, each one a little more confident than the last. By the end of the first year, the association's ledger, which I later subpoenaed, showed my name carrying $1,100 in fines I had never been told the basis for. I did not pay $1. I filed every letter, and I drove to the county courthouse one Tuesday morning and pulled a certified copy of my recorded deed and the original plat. And I put both in the folder behind the letters. That was the difference between Diane and me. And it is the difference between winning and losing one of these fights. She was building a story. I was building a record. It was around then that I learned why a Lake Association president cared so much about 11 acres she had no claim to. My neighbor down the South Shore, a retired schoolteacher named Lena Frost, stopped me at the post office on a gray Tuesday in October. Lena had taught with Carol and had lived on the lake longer than anyone, in a small cedar house her parents built, and she missed nothing. She put a hand on my sleeve in the lobby. "You got a minute, Walt?" she said. It was not a question. We went out to the bench by the flag. "You know what her husband does, don't you?" she said. I did not. Diane's husband, Greg Coyle, ran a development company 2 counties over, the kind that buys a hay field and turns it into 90 houses with a fountain at the entrance. Lena told me she had been walking the old logging trail above the north shoulder the previous fall, the way she did most mornings, and she had come on a crew driving survey stakes near my line, orange flagging tied to each one. She had asked the man with the transit what they were marking. He had been friendly enough. Marina Village, he told her. Condos, a restaurant, dry storage, 100 slips, big one. Lena had gone home and not slept. I heard the rest of it at the Grange, she said. Greg Coyle has been telling people he's got the whole North Shore lined up. 100 slips, Walt. There's only one place on this lake you can put 100 slips. She looked at me. It's your basin. A development like that needed deep water, a launch, and shoreline access, and there was exactly one parcel on Cedar Hollow Lake that had all 3. My Marina Basin was the only deep water frontage on the whole lake. The rest of it shallow and reedy and useless for anything bigger than a canoe. Diane was not policing my dock because she cared about aesthetics. She was building a paper record of authority over my parcel so that when the time came, her husband could point to years of association oversight and a pile of unpaid fines and a lien and say the North Shore had been theirs in all but name. She was trying to soften up the one parcel that stood between her husband and a fortune. I thanked Lena. I went home and wrote down everything she had told me, the date, the man with the transit, the Grange, the 100 slips. And I filed it behind the letters. I want to pause here for just a moment, the only time I will, to say one thing directly. If you own waterfront, or land with any kind of access somebody else might want, go pull your deed this week and read the legal description against the ground. Hardly anyone ever reads their own deed. I had read mine 100 times. That is the whole reason I could sleep at night while Diane mailed me invoices. Now back to it. The second year, the escalation widened. Diane stopped writing only to me and started writing to other people about me. A notice went up on the association's community board, the one by the mailboxes where everybody saw it, printed on the letterhead, claiming the North Shore Marina was under review for safety violations, and asking residents to report any unauthorized commercial activity. I did not run a commercial operation. A few old friends still kept boats in my slips for a handful of dollars a season, a courtesy more than a business. And Carol had always liked the company on the water, the way the basin filled up on a Saturday and somebody was always frying fish on the dock. Within a month, 2 of those friends got letters from the association warning them their boats were improperly moored on contested waterfront and might be subject to removal at owner expense. One of them, a rancher named Hollis Pruitt, who had kept a flat bottom in my basin for 20 years, drove out to show me the letter. Hollis is built like a fence post and about as talkative, and he stood in my kitchen turning the letter over in his big hands, like it might bite him. "This legal, Walt?" he asked. I told him it was not. I told him the association had no more authority over his boat in my water than it had over the moon. "She can't take my boat," he said, and it was halfway between a question and a dare. I told him to keep the letter, every copy of it, and not to answer it, and not to move his boat 1 inch. He folded it back into his shirt pocket. "All right," he said, "but if she touches it, I'm calling you first." I photographed the letter front and back, and I filed it. Incident 11. I'd stopped trusting my memory and started numbering them. The fake authority came next, and it came in a golf cart. One Saturday morning in June, a man in a navy polo with an embroidered association logo and a plastic badge clipped to his belt rolled down the hill in a white association golf cart, parked it at the top of my ramp, and walked out onto my dock with a camera, photographing the boats in my slips one by one. I came down from the house, drying my hands on a rag. I asked him what he was doing. "Inspection," he said, not looking up, thumbing through shots on the back of the camera. "Association compliance walkthrough." I asked to see his credentials. He tapped the plastic badge on his belt without looking at me, the way a man flashes something he knows will not hold up. I asked his name. He did not give it. I told him he was standing on private property recorded under my name, that I had it on camera, and that he had 30 seconds to walk back up the ramp before I called the sheriff and reported a trespass. He looked up then, and something in my face must have told him the deed was real, because he put the lens cap on and walked back up the dock without another word and drove the cart up the hill. I had the whole thing on my own cameras. 2 of them, which I had installed at the head of the dock the previous spring after the first letters, and which saved to a drive in the house, and a second drive I kept in a fireproof box in the closet. That footage went into the folder too, burned to a disk, dated on the sleeve in marker. I did call the sheriff that afternoon, not to report a crime exactly, but to get it on record. A deputy named Sam Ortiz came out. Sam was maybe 40, calm. The kind of officer who has seen every flavor of neighbor dispute and is tired of all of them. He looked at my deed, walked the line with me, and told me something I have thought about many times since. "Here's the hard part, Walt," he said. "If she files a complaint, we have to respond to it. Doesn't matter if it's nonsense. The way you win this isn't shouting at her. It's the pattern. You build a record so thick that when it lands in front of a judge or a hearing, there's nothing left to argue." He told me to document every single contact, get names, get times, save everything twice. "When you've got a dozen documented incidents and a clean deed," he said, "you won't need me. The paper will do it." I told him I already had more than a dozen. He almost smiled. "Then keep going," he said. So I kept going. The 3rd year is when it turned from harassment into something with real money behind it. Greg Coyle's company filed a preliminary plat with the county for the Marina village, and the plat assumed access across the North Shore launch ramp. My ramp. The application listed the launch as existing community infrastructure. I knew that the moment a county planner read my parcel number against that application, the whole thing would stall, because you cannot plat a development across land you do not own. I also knew Diane and Greg were betting that a 61-year-old widower would cave before it ever got that far. They had no idea who they were betting against. That winter, the fines on the association ledger crossed $4,000. In February, Diane sent a letter, certified this time, stating that under the association's bylaws, unpaid assessments could result in a lien and the seizure and sale of personal property stored on association-managed waterfront. It was a threat dressed up in bylaw language. The bylaws, she cited, did not apply to my parcel and could not reach my property under any reading of state law. I wrote back, 1 paragraph again, restating that my land was not within the association and warning that any seizure of my property would be theft. I sent it certified. I kept the green card. Incident 26. I should tell you about my daughter here, because she is part of this. Her name is Maddie. She was 17 that winter, a junior at the regional high school, and after Carol died, it had been the 2 of us in the house on the North Shoulder, learning how to cook and how to be quiet together and how to keep going. Maddie is sharper than I was at her age. She has Carol's patience and my suspicion, which is a dangerous combination in a teenager and a useful one in an ally. She was the one who set up the second camera drive without my asking, ran the cable herself along the rafters, and labeled the box. She was the one who started a spreadsheet of the association's letters, a column for the date, A column for the claimed amount, a column for what covenant they cited, which was always blank, because they never cited one. She printed it out and taped it inside the folder cover next to my handwritten list. "Dad," she said one night over dinner, tapping the latest certified letter where it sat on the table between us. "She's going to do something stupid. People who send letters like this always do. They get tired of being ignored, and they do something they can't take back." She was eating with one hand and scrolling the association's public meeting minutes with the other. "When she does," she said, "we're going to have all of it." She was right on both counts. And I have thought many times since about how a 17-year-old saw it coming when I, with all my years of reading bluffs, was still hoping the woman would simply give up. The day it happened was a Monday in late April, almost 4 years to the week after Carol passed. I had driven the 2 hours to Coeur d'Alene for a hull inspection, a 40-foot cabin cruiser a bank wanted looked at before a loan, and I would not be back until evening. Maddie was at school. While the house was empty and both of us were gone, a tow company hired by the association backed a trailer down my launch ramp, ran a strap around the Chris Craft's hull, winched my wife's boat out of its slip, and hauled it up the hill and away. Diane had a document she called a lien sale notice, printed on the letterhead, citing the association bylaws, and she had a buyer already lined up, a man from the next county who paid $800 cash for a wooden boat worth $30,000 restored. By the time I got the call, I was an hour up the highway. It was Maddie. She had left school early and gone home and found the slip empty. I could hear the dock under her feet and the wind in the phone, and she was not speaking in sentences. "Dad, the boat, it's gone. The slip's empty. There's a yellow notice on the cleat." A breath. There was a trailer, the cameras. I'm looking at it right now. There's a truck on the camera. I told her to slow down. I told her to breathe. I told her I was coming, to stay on the dock, not to touch the notice, to take pictures of everything exactly as it was. "I already am," she said, and her voice cracked and steadied in the same word. "I already am, Dad." I drove the rest of the way with both hands tight on the wheel and the speedometer higher than I will admit. By the time I got home, it was near dark. The slip was empty, a flat black rectangle of water where 4 winters used to float. There was a yellow notice zip-tied to the dock cleat, flapping a little. Maddie was standing on the dock holding her phone, and she had been crying. And she was also, in the way she gets, furious and organized. "I have the whole thing," she said before I was out of the truck. "The camera's got the trailer backing down. I got the plate off the freeze frame. I called the tow company and said I had a wood boat to sell and asked, who does they're hauling, and the guy told me the whole thing. He told me the buyer's name and what county he's in." 17 years old. She had photographed the notice, the empty slip, the fresh gouge the trailer left in the concrete of the ramp. I put my arms around her, and we stood on the dock for a minute, and neither of us said anything. The lake going flat and silver in the last light. Then I went inside and opened the folder. I want to tell you what I felt, because banked anger is the engine of this whole story, and I had never felt it like that. My hands did not shake. My jaw set. I made coffee because my hands needed something to do. And then I did the thing I always do. I sat down at the kitchen table with the folder and Maddie's spreadsheet, and I started building the timeline, because a feeling is not evidence, and a record is. By midnight, I had it. 26 documented incidents over 3 years. A forged lien sale notice citing bylaws that did not apply to a parcel that was not in the association. A towing receipt. A buyer. Camera footage of the theft from 2 angles. And under all of it, the bedrock, my grandfather's 1951 deed, and the recorded plat showing the Marina Basin and the launch ramp inside my meets and bounds, and nowhere near the subdivision. Diane Coyle had finally done something stupid, exactly as Maddie predicted. She had not just made a claim she could not defend. She had reached onto land she did not own and taken property that did not belong to her. And she had created a paper trail to do it. A theft you commit with a forged document is a far easier thing to prove than a theft you commit in the dark. The next morning, I made 3 calls. The first was to Sam Ortiz. I told him what had happened and that I had it all on camera and that I wanted to file a report for theft. He came out within the hour, parked the cruiser at the top of the ramp, and walked down to the dock with his hat in his hand. He watched the footage twice, the trailer backing down, the strap, the boat coming up out of the water, the plate. He read the lien sale notice line by line. When he straightened up, his whole posture had changed, the tired patience gone out of it. "This isn't a neighbor dispute anymore, Walt," he said quietly. "This is grand theft. The dollar value alone makes it a felony, and the forged instrument makes it worse, because now there's intent on paper." He took the disc and the original notice into evidence, wrote me a receipt for both, and started filling out a report on the hood of his cruiser. "You did this right," he said without looking up. 3 years of this, and you never gave her a single thing to point at. That's why this is going to stick." The second call was to a title company in town, where I had a working relationship going back 20 years, a place that had certified hundreds of my survey jobs. I asked them to pull and certify the full chain of title on my parcel and the Marina Basin, every conveyance from my grandfather's 1951 deed forward, and to pull a certified copy of the original recorded plat. I wanted a clean, stamped, official package with the county recorder's seal on it that no one could wave away as my opinion. They told me to give them a few days. They had it ready by Thursday, a thick envelope with a blue ribbon and an embossed seal. The chain unbroken, no gap, no cloud, my name at the end of it. The third call I made standing at the kitchen window, looking at the empty slip. And it was the one that changed the whole shape of this. I called my banker, a woman named Ruth I had known for years, and I asked her what was in my accounts and what she could move by Friday. Because here is the thing I had been turning over since midnight. The Cedar Hollow Marina, the deep water basin and the slips and the fuel dock and the ramp, was a commercial property. And I had spent 3 years watching Greg Coyle structure an entire development around getting access to it. I owned the basin outright. The South Shore Association's own little marina, the floating guest docks they had built for the subdivision residents, sat in a shallow cove that drained to open water through a single channel, and that channel crossed the mouth of my basin. Their boats had to pass my water to reach the lake. I had never once made anything of it, never charged $1, never posted a sign. And there was one more piece. The county held a small commercial marina lease on the parcel that abutted mine. The overflow guest moorage the association leased every summer for visitor boats. And the previous leaseholder had defaulted that winter, and the county had put the lease up for sale. It abutted my basin and shared my channel. If I bought it, I would control every foot of navigable commercial water on Cedar Hollow Lake, the basin by deed and the overflow by lease, and the only channel to open water through both. Ruth said the money was there. I told her to get it ready. By Monday, 1 week after Diane towed my wife's boat off a slip she did not own, I closed on the marina. The whole marina. Every commercial slip the association did not hold in fee, the guest moorage they relied on, the fuel concession, and the channel lease. It cost me a good portion of what I had saved, and I did not hesitate, because some things are not about the money. The association that had spent 3 years pretending to have authority over my water now had no legal moorage for its own guest boats and no channel access except across property I owned outright. I did not send Diane a letter about it. I did not have to. The county records would tell her soon enough. The reckoning came at the association's quarterly open meeting, held in the community hall by the mailboxes on a Thursday evening in May. I had not planned to speak. I went because the agenda, posted on the same board where Diane had slandered my Marina, listed an item titled North Shore Waterfront Acquisition Strategy, and I wanted to hear her say it out loud. Maddie came with me. So did Hollis Pruitt and Lena Frost and Sam Ortiz in plain clothes standing at the back, and a woman I did not recognize who turned out to be a reporter from the regional paper that Lena had quietly called. Diane ran the meeting from a folding table at the front, Greg beside her in a sport coat. She got through the budget and the landscaping contract, and then she came to the waterfront item, and she stood up. "As many of you know," she said, "the association has been working to bring the North Shore Marina into community control. That parcel is functionally part of our lake, and its current owner has refused every reasonable effort at cooperation. I'm pleased to report that we've taken enforcement action and that the path forward is clear." She looked across the room at me when she said it, and she smiled. And that was the third time I heard her say that word, functionally, about land she had never once verified the ownership of. I stood up. The room got quiet, the kind of quiet where you hear the fluorescent lights hum. I did not raise my voice. I have never in my life had less desire to shout. "Diane," I said, "I'd like to put 2 documents on the table." I walked to the front of the room. My boots were loud on the linoleum, and nobody else made a sound. I set down the first sheet, squared it with the edge of the table. "This is the recorded deed to the North Shore parcel, including the Marina Basin and the launch ramp. It was recorded in 1951. My grandfather signed it. The legal description does not touch your subdivision at any point." I set down the second, the certified plat with the recorder's seal, and I laid my hand flat on it. "This is the original recorded survey. Same year, same county vault. It shows the same thing the deed does. Your association has been mailing me fines for 3 years on land it has no jurisdiction over, and not one of those letters ever cited a covenant, because there isn't one." I let that sit a moment. Then I set down a third sheet I had not announced. "And this is the recorded sale, closed yesterday, of the commercial marina lease abutting my basin. As of this week, I own every foot of commercial moorage and the only navigable channel on this lake. Your guest docks have no legal moorage. Your residents reach open water by crossing my water, which until now they have done by my goodwill." Diane's mouth opened, and nothing came out. She looked at the 3 sheets on the table and then at Greg. And Greg stood up too fast, and his folding chair scraped and tipped and clattered against the wall. Sam Ortiz walked up from the back, unhurried, and laid a single page beside mine. "Mrs. Coyle," he said, "this is a notice that the county has opened a criminal investigation into the towing and sale of Mr. Brenner's vessel under a lien instrument that references bylaws inapplicable to his parcel. I'd advise you not to say anything further tonight." The reporter was writing fast. Nobody in that room was looking at me. They were looking at Diane, and at the 3 documents under my hand, and at the deputy. And the silence held for a long moment, the longest I can remember, before the whole room seemed to let out its breath at once. Here are the 2 numbers I want you to hold next to each other. In 3 years, the association collected $0 in legitimate fines from me, because not one of them was owed. In 1 week, The association lost its guest moorage, its channel access, and the entire premise of a Marina village its president's husband had been quietly platting, and Diane Coyle was facing a felony for a boat she sold for $800. The consequences came on schedule, the way they do when the paper is clean. The county rejected Greg Coyle's preliminary plat within the month because the application had assumed access across a launch ramp recorded under my name, and you cannot plat a development across land you do not own. A planner I knew told me later the application did not survive the first title check. That the moment my parcel number came up against the access claim, the whole file went back in the box. The Marina village died on a desk without a single shovel ever going in the ground. The investors Greg had lined up read about the criminal referral in the reporter's article, which ran on the front of the regional weekend section under a photograph of my empty slip, and they were gone by July. The association's insurer, once it saw the forged lien notice and the criminal referral, sent the board a reservation of rights letter and then declined to cover Diane's defense. And the board, suddenly facing personal exposure for what their president had done in their name, voted her out at a special meeting in June. The new board's first act was to send me a short, almost shy letter asking whether the association could lease guest moorage from me for the season, since their old overflow lease now belonged to me. I let them. I am not in the business of punishing my neighbors for the sins of one president. And most of those people had been lied to as thoroughly as I had been harassed. I charged them a fair rate, the same rate the county had charged, and I put the agreement in writing, and I filed it behind everything else. Diane pleaded to a reduced charge to avoid trial. She paid restitution, and the association repaid the fines it had collected from other people on the strength of her letters. The Chris Craft came home in July. The buyer, when he learned how he had come to own it, drove it back to my ramp on a borrowed trailer himself, a quiet man who had thought he was getting a deal at an estate sale and was sick about it once he knew. He would not take a dime for the gas. Maddie and I backed it down the ramp and floated it into its old slip. And the basin was full that evening the way it used to be. Hollis frying fish 3 slips down, the light going long and gold across the water. The boat needed some work after the rough handling, a cracked rub rail and a gouge in the top sides where the strap had bitten. We did that work together over the rest of the summer, the way Carol and I had done it, in the cold shop that was not cold in July, sanding and varnish and long evenings on the dock with the doors open. Maddie did the bright work. She had watched her mother do it, and her hands knew the rhythm. 8 coats, hand-rubbed between each. Maddie graduated the following spring, and she is studying engineering now, 2 states away, and she calls on Sunday evenings. She told me last week she is thinking about coming back to the lake when she is done, that there is good work for an engineer who understands water. I told her there is room. I told her there has always been room. I kept the folder. It sits on the shelf above the kitchen table where I can see it. The certified deed is in it, and the plat and 26 numbered incidents, and a green card from a certified letter, and a disc with footage of a trailer backing down my ramp. I do not look at it often anymore. I know it is there, and that is enough. So here is the lesson, plainly the way I promised. The world is slow, but it is fair to people who keep records. If somebody with a clipboard and a laminated badge tells you that your land is functionally theirs, do not argue with them on the dock. Go pull your deed. Read the legal description against the ground you stand on. File a records request for anything you do not understand. Photograph every contact. Write down the date, save it twice, and put it where a fire cannot reach it. Talk to your neighbors, because the person harassing you is almost never doing it for the reason they claim. And your neighbors often know the real one. Build the binder before you need it. A calm man with a clean deed beats a loud woman with a clipboard every single time, but only if he wrote it all down. If you have a story like this, a fence, a gate, a slip, a strip of land somebody tried to take with a piece of paper they had no right to sign, put it in the comments. I read them. If this kind of story is what you came for, subscribe, because there are more of them, and the people in them kept their records too. Next time, I will tell you about a man whose HOA paved a road straight through his grandfather's apple orchard while he was at his wife's funeral, and what he found in the county vault that put it all back. Until then, walk your boundaries and keep your folder where you can reach it.